الله أكبر حي على الصلاة الله أكبر.
Arise, giving all praises to the great God of the universe, affectionately known to the Moorish Americans as Allah. Allah is the author, creator, the governor of the worlds, the almighty, eternal, and incomprehensible. All praises are due to Allah. Islam. I extend the highest of honors to His holy and divine prophet, Prophet Noble Drew Ali, the founder of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Islam. I extend a high honors to his forerunner, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, who did indeed warn and stir up the nations. Islam. I extend high honors to the Moorish flag, the red flag with the 5-pointed green star in the center. These 5 points represent love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Our flag is over 10,000 years old. Islam. Extend high honors to the American flag, also known as the Stars and Stripes. This flag exists as a constant reminder that the European nations owe you the Moors compound interest. Islam. This is also the flag of our birth. Islam Moors. Extend high honors to the acting Sheikh staff, the acting Vanguard staff who keep the peace, and giving honors to you, the Eels and Bays, for without you there is no Moorish movement. Islam Moors. How's everyone on a holy day? Praise Allah Moors. Islam Moors, which is our holy day?
Friday.
Why?
Because Friday was the day that was formed and fresh. It was on a Friday that you part out of it.
Islam. Praise Allah for sending Prophet Noble Drew Ali to reestablish our holy day so we can realign ourselves back with our Father God Allah, and where we can remind ourselves of our divine creed and our nationality. Moors, tonight I kind of want to demonstrate and kind of keep the vibrations along the ideal of how important our forerunner was to us. Islam Moors? A lot of times we don't give the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey his dues. Like in the Moorish Science Temple of America, we open, we give our honors, we mention his name. You know what I'm saying? Some temples you go to, they'll even fly the red, black, and green banner. But in terms of going deep inside of what the forerunner brought, what he taught, and what he represented for not just Moorish Americans, proclaimed Moorish Americans, but Asiatics, not only here but all over the world. Islam. There was a very important man. Heads of state all over the world have used things that he taught about in the 1920s and have built nations for themselves, organized nations for themselves. Islam? All right? So him coming to us first, we should look at that as a part of our birthright. Islam? Now, the Moorish Science Temple of America, when we give our honors, like I said, you'll notice we open, any sheikh, grand sheikh, governor, grand governor, governess, so on and so forth. You'll see that, we have to give honors to Marcus Mosiah Garvey. But you'll notice he's the only Asiatic leader that we give honors to. And the reason why that is because he's the only one that's explicitly mentioned in our Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Islam? Now, does that mean that we don't honor other Asiatic leaders? Of course not, right? But our prophet gave us specific instructions by putting his name in our religious text. Islam? So for those who have Qurans, and for those who don't, if you can get Brother Quillen one, there's one right behind you more. All right? And we're going to be drawing from chapter 48, which is the last chapter of the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America. While you're looking, I'll demonstrate the cover. The Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America, divinely prepared by the noble prophet Drew Ali, by the guiding of his Father God Allah, the great God of the universe, to redeem man from his sinful and fallen stage of humanity back to the highest plane of life with his Father God Allah. Islam? All right? So we will demonstrate from chapter 48, which is entitled The End of Time and the Fulfilling of the Prophecies. Islam? Now, the prophet mentions the prophecies as though you're already supposed to know what that is, right? Because again, when you aware of your nationality and your divine creed, you're able to trace yourselves back to the ancient prophets who came to us and become aware or acclimate yourselves to the prophecies that they put down, all right, that they were inspired by Allah to reveal. All right. So prophet tells us about the lands of Egypt, India, and Palestine, right, in the beginning of our Quran. Each one of those lands was given a particular gift or a thing to safeguard, right? Unto Egypt was given the science of the knowledge of self, right? Unto India was given the science of the holy breath. So a lot of stuff about yoga and all these sciences you'll notice coming out of India or being inspired by India and adopted by other lands around. And unto Palestine was given the science of prophecy. Islam? So the Hebraic line of prophets that you have in that book that you call Bible, right, is the line of prophets comes from the land and the surrounding lands of Palestine. And many of the prophets that that the Prophet Noble Drew Ali references is coming through that that line of prophets that come down out of the land of Palestine and the surrounding lands. Islam? All right. So out of that, right? All those records, what the prophet calls the true and divine records of the human race. You have prophecies relative to the end of time and the fulfilling of the prophecies. So starting at instruction 1, we read, the last prophet in these days is Noble Drew Ali, who was divinely prepared in due time by Allah to redeem men from their sinful ways and to warn them of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth. Let me pause there, right? And it says, 'cause I don't want us to get caught up like other Islamic groups that have gotten caught up relative to the prophet that came to them, right? It says the last prophet in these days is Noble Drew Ali. Didn't say the last prophet that will ever come. Because as long as man is existing in the carnal plane, you'll find, times when man is falling away from the light of the divine. So, humanity as a whole will need guidance, right? So Allah, out of his infinite mercy, will allow thoughts of himself to, manifest themselves in flesh, right? And to bring a message to get the people back on the path and to correct them based upon what they're strayed away from. Islam, all right? In ancient times, like I said, our forefathers always knew who they were, right? They, they knew they were Hebrew Israelites, or they knew they were Moabites. They knew who they were, but they start worshiping foreign gods, foreign ideals, so on and so forth, right? So the prophets sent to them came to correct them and bring them back along that ideal. Noble Drew Ali had to come to a people that didn't know who they were and were worshiping foreign gods. Okay? So instruction 2. John the Baptist was the forerunner of Jesus in those days to warn and stir up the nation and prepare them to receive the divine creed, which was to be taught by Jesus. In these modern days, there came a forerunner who was divinely prepared by the great God Allah, and his name is Marcus Garvey, who did teach and warn the nations of the earth to prepare to meet the coming prophets, who was to bring the true and divine creed of Islam. And his name is Noble Drew Ali, who was prepared and sent to this earth by Allah to teach the old time religion and the everlasting gospel to the sons of men, that every nation shall and must worship under their own vine and fig tree and return to their own and be at one with their Father God, Allah. Islam? Now, what do we notice? We notice that in the ancient times, there was a forerunner before the Messiah came, before Jesus came. So there was one that came and, opened the way, paved the way and stirred the nations to receive that one. When you read the biblical record, right, it goes into how, John the Baptist had converted all of Jerusalem and Judea prior to Jesus' arrival, right? And he put the Roman nations on notice as to one that was coming after him. Islam? So the people were already awakened to a holy zeal about the time that they were in and the prophecies relative to that. So by the time Jesus came, they were already looking for a particular one. And they were asking him, are you that one? Are you that one? Islam? All right. So now the prophet brings us to the awakening of the fact that in these modern days and times, there also was a forerunner that came that did the exact same thing that the previous forerunner did. Why is that? Because we measure time by what? Cycle ages, right? So when you know yourself, you look at the time, you look at the universe, whatever, and if you know what you're looking at, you say, we can expect this one to come. Islam? But people don't like when prophets come. People don't like when prophets come because prophets don't come when things are nice. Prophets don't come when you're doing what you're supposed to do. When you see a prophet, people are like, oh, here he go. Man, we got to change now. Islam? And people get on some like, well, we don't really want to change, so let's get rid of the prophet. As though getting rid of the prophet is going to change what's coming, the things that he was going to warn you about. Right? You're going to kill the messenger, right? Because of the message he's bringing, right? Makes no sense whatsoever, right? And unfortunately, we descend from the prophet killers. Islam? Like we blame Rome for Jesus' crucifixion, but Rome didn't set that up. Our forefathers set that up. Islam? And the prophet covers that in our Quran. So, Allah willing, we'll seek to do better about that, right? Instruction 4. The Moorish Science Temple of America is a lawfully chartered and incorporated organization. Any subordinate temple that desires to receive a charter, the prophet has them to issue to every state throughout the United States, etc., that the world may hear and know the truth. That the world may hear and know the truth. That among the descendants of Africa, there is still much wisdom to be learned in these days for the redemption of the sons of men under love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Again, let me pause there. The forerunner that came in our days and times, his slogan was, Africa for the Africans. So he said, just like you had, France for the French, Germany for the Germans, England for the English, we should have Africa for the Africans, right? Now, Prophet Noble Drew Ali coming after him could not have changed that message. He had to camelback and, flesh out that message, all right? So you have that right here. He says that the world may hear and know the truth, that among the descendants of Africa, there is still much wisdom to be learned. See, there are Moorish Americans that were once claiming to be Moorish Americans that would seek to deceive you in that regard and say, we don't have anything to do with Africa, we're just from here in America. Islam? But clearly, he who has an ear, let him hear. That is not what the prophet said, right? And we do ourselves a disservice by even teaching that, right? Because we weaken ourselves. Because the forerunner taught us that we want to align ourselves, well, not just with the Asiatics here in America, but the ones down in the islands, the ones down in South America, the ones in Africa, Islam. And if you pick up Noble Drew Ali, you go to chapter 45, the divine origins of the Asiatics, he's talking about the Turks, Chinese, the Japanese, Islam, all right? But charity begins at home. Islam. So, we have to follow the immediate instructions. And once we get that down, then we can extend the learning. Islam. All right. Instruction 6. We as a clean and pure nation, descended from the inhabitants of Africa, do not desire to amalgamate or marry into the families of the pale-skinned nations of Europe. Neither serve the gods of their religion, because our forefathers are the true and divine founders of the first religious creed for the redemption and salvation of mankind on earth. Islam? Note that the prophet referred to you as a nation. Islam? There's such thing. Now, does that put us at odds with this ideal? No, it does not. Because there are nations within nations. Islam? The French have a nation here in America. Their united constituency makes them a nation in this nation. Islam? The English, the Senegalese, the Gambians that are here, right? All of them formed individual body politics inside of this nation, right? To petition the government to get what they need for their pedigree. And we have to do the same. Islam? All right? And we have to learn to work between the Asiatic groups to make that constituency stronger and more powerful. Islam? That's the spirit of the forerunner, right? Instruction 7. Therefore, we are returning the church and Christianity back to the European nations as it was prepared by their forefathers for their earthly salvation, while we, the Moorish Americans, are returning to Islam, which was founded by our forefathers for our earthly and divine salvation. Now, Moors, the prophet says, I hereby inform all members that they must put an end to all radical and agitating speech while on their jobs, homes, or on the public streets. That's in what we call the divine warning, right? Now, take that as a caveat when reading instructions 7 and 8, because we're not attacking nobody that's an Asiatic, that's a Christian. We're not running up in churches being disrespectful. We're not doing that. Moors, Islam? A saying that is attributed to the Prophet Noble Drew Ali says that when a Moor enters a church, it is no longer a church, it is a temple. And that's, some of our best Moors are in the church. Islam, Moors? Because, one thing about our Christian brothers and sisters is that they have a zeal relative to commitment to their religious ideal that a lot of quote-unquote conscious community organizations don't have, right? So don't attack our brothers and sisters because they're Christians, because we love Jesus too. Islam, Moors? Praise Allah, Moors. And we're just going to do last 3 instructions and then I'll move forward and get ready to call our first speaker to the floor. Instruction 9. The covenant of the great God Allah. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be longer upon the earth land which the Lord thy God Allah hath given thee. Come all ye Asiatics, and hear the truth about your nationality and birthrights, because you are not Negroes. Learn of your forefathers' ancient and divine creed, that you will learn to love instead of hate. We are trying to uplift fallen humanity. Come and link yourselves with the families of nations. We honor all the true and divine prophets. Islam? Instruction 9 is clearly, a carryover from the ancient, Israelite great covenant, right, of that honoring your father and our mother. The note that says that your days may be longer upon the earth land. You can extend your life existence on this plane of existence by honoring your forefathers, right? All the great nations that you see that do, that are strong, do this, all right? The ones that you see that, experience slavery don't. right? And to the point where, our forefathers experienced slavery, which is not just isolated to us. Every nation has suffered slavery, right? But, we suffered slavery because we didn't honor our forefathers and our foremothers. Islam? And instructions 10 or 11 are actually a call that the Prophet Noble Drew Ali used to use when he would go to new cities, and demonstrating, calling people to the faith, and the religion of Islamism, that come all ye Asiatics of America and hear the truth about your nationality and birthrights. Again, hear that. Come all ye Asiatics, not some of them, right? Not the ones I agree with, not the ones who our doctrine's the same, not the ones who we dress alike, Islam, or we in the same fraternity or sorority. No, all ye Asiatics. Islam, which means that you got some studying to do. Because if you're going to speak intelligently, right, to all Asiatics, you must study what they study. Islam.
Arise, giving all praise to Father God Allah and His divine Prophet Noble Drew Ali.
Islam.
I wanted to ask about honor thy father and thy mother.
Yes.
Because I know I had heard and understood there's a second meaning to that as well.
Okay, what do you have?
For the European, as far as Asiatics.
Okay, go ahead.
You're supposed to honor the father and mother of the planet, Earth and Asia. And so is that for them as well, to honor Asiatics?
No, that's a universal creed for all people must worship under that. Shall and must. That was the law, right? Let's go back so you can get that demonstration. All right? So, if you go to instruction 3, the last sentence in instruction 3 of chapter 48, right? That every nation shall and must worship under their own vine and fig tree, and return to their own and be at one with their Father God Allah. Islam, family, all right? And that's, the reason why that is because, Allah forbid, but let's say, obviously you're Moorish American, let's say I'm European. Notice I said Allah forbid. That being the case, right? I didn't say that to be radical, but that being the case, right? It would be unlawful from a universal perspective for me to make you honor my forefathers, or you to make me honor your forefathers. Islam, that violates the ancient code, all right? Islam, because what happens, you'll see that, here's how broad-minded our forefathers were, our Moorish forefathers, whom we refer to as the ancient Moorish fathers, right? They were so broad-minded that when we conquered European lands, we didn't destroy their history. Think about that. When the European nations ran through Asiatic territories, a thing that was a popular fad in those days was called book burnings. Right? They'd light a giant bonfire and they gather all the books from the libraries of that land they conquered and start chucking the ones that the Pope didn't want. Because the Pope sent out, gather these books and send them back to the Vatican, right? But aside from those ones, they took all the other ones and threw it into a fire and burnt them, okay? Now, the Moors, when they heard this was going on, right, will go around to these various different lands and grab as many books as they can and split them up around the planet, right? So, to various different places that we had set up, sacred schools of thought, right? And we put them there so that way, when the internal strife of these lands went down, we can go back and retrieve those records and go back and give them to their people, right? Again, I've used this before. How many people have heard of Aristotle? Okay, Pythagoras, right? Herodotus, Cicero, all these various different ones, right? How is it that you know about these Greek philosophers? Do you know how that comes down to you?
It's coming from European philosophy.
True, but how do you have it in your possession in this day and time?
Because it's pushed through the academics.
True, but here's how the academic circles got it, right? Because you gotta remember, a date to remember, so you're taking notes, write down 476 AD, okay? Islam sister, with the gold turban on. 476 AD, right? 476 AD was when the Visigoths, Visigoth, the Visigoths, right? Who were a barbaric Germanic tribe, right? Sacked Rome and destroyed Rome, right? Rome at that point was the capital of the Western Roman Empire. Right, the Roman Empire was so broad they split into two halves with two seats of government. You had Rome was the Western capital, and Constantinople was the Eastern capital. Okay, which was governed by the Byzantines. And we had that when we go in our 101s when we talk about 1453 in the parentheses says Byzantine. But the Byzantines were Greek speakers. Okay, but when they sacked Rome, they destroyed the city, burnt up everything. And the barbarians, most of them couldn't read, so books meant nothing to them, right? So what they did was they took and started burning up a lot of books. A lot of Moors had a good working relationship with the ancient Romans because we were the ancient master builders. Okay, so all the Greek, the Roman structures that you see, you see all this like the Parthenon and the Colosseums and so on and so forth. Did no Europeans build that? Moors built that. Islam. You go into that history, they'll talk about these great African builders that built this stuff, but they won't tell you those were the Moors. Islam. But anyway, the Moors went in and gathered all these manuscripts, right, and took them back to secret places or whatever, and preserved them. They actually went in because remember the Greeks and the Romans were students of the ancient Egyptians. Okay, so a lot of times students don't always get the lesson right. So the Moors went in and corrected a lot of the Greek works and then put them back into circulation. That's how we know who they are today. If it wasn't for our Moorish forefathers, we wouldn't even know who Aristotle and all them were. Islam? All right, and Europeans in high academic circles will admit that. Right? In high school, you'll never learn that. Right? In your college circles, you'll find that out. You know what I'm saying? They'll admit that, like, yeah, if it wasn't for the Moors, you know what I'm saying? What they'll say, Andalusia, right? For those taking notes, Andalusia, 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 which was the name that the Moors referred to Spain as. Right? El Andalus as well, right? And that was named after the tribe of people that were there, the Vandals. So even look at that, right, about the mindset of your forefathers. We honored the people that were there by naming the land that we just conquered after them. Not after us, we just put it in our language, Islam. But we honored that they were there before us. So your forefathers weren't a hateful people, even though we were militarily strong, super strong, right? But we didn't seek to take somebody's birthright. That wasn't our way. Islam? And that's something important to know because we can't become that. If we become that, then we become less enough. Then we're not honoring our forefathers. That means we'll see slavery again. Islam? And that we're definitely not trying to do. Islam? All right. So, with that thought, I will yield the floor to our next speaker. Our next speaker, our brother acting sheikh, brother Raphael Hakim Bey. Islam? Islam?
Islam.
Having already risen, again I rise, giving all praises to the great God of the universe, Allah, and the highest of honors to his holy divine prophet, noble Drali Islam. Brother Quillen, for your question, if we could go to chapter in our holy Qurans. Let's go to chapter 18. So our brother Acting Sheikh invoked something relative to prophets about divine flesh. So let's talk about divine flesh. Right? And chapter 17 is entitled, Jesus appears fully materialized before Apollo and the silent brotherhood in Greece, appears to Claudius and Juliet on the Tiber near Rome, appears to the priests in the Egyptian temple at Heliopolis. Yes. 17. Yes. XVII. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to start at instruction 35. We're here, Islam, when you're there.
Islam.
Wait a bit more. Again, chapter 17, starting at instruction 35. Islam. Praise Allah. Now, instruction 35 reads, in flesh, now this is a lesson, Moors. The prophet's giving you a blessing here. It says, in flesh of man, there is the essence of the resurrection of the dead. This essence, quickened by the holy breath, will raise the substance of the body to a higher tone and make it like the substance of the bodies of the planes above, which human eyes cannot behold. There is a holy ministry in death. The essence of the body cannot be quickened by the holy breath until the fixed is solved. The body must disintegrate, and this is death. That's what we call death, right? Moving forward, it says, 38. And then upon these pliant substances, Allah breathes just as he breathed upon the chaos of the deep when the worlds were formed. And life springs forth from death. The carnal form is changed to form divine. Okay? The will of man makes possible the action of the holy breath. When will of man and will of Allah are one, the resurrection is a fact. In this, we have the chemistry of mortal life, the ministry of death, the mystery of deific life, deific meaning godlike, right? He says, my whole form was wholly given to bring my will to tune with the deific will. And when this was done, my earth tasks all were done. And that right there encapsulates, because what we're talking about is, we're talking about the plane of existence we're existing in right now, the chronoplane, right? Well, everything in the universe vibrates. Everything, right? Molecules. Like you take a piece of your skin cell off looking at a microscope, right? You can't see your skin vibrate. Looking at a microscope, you see the molecules steadily going like this, right? All right? Now, what happens is, what holds this body together is that the molecules are vibrating at a certain point, certain pace, right? If your molecules were to pick up, even in this form, right? Like you can accelerate that by breathing exercises, right? Our ancient forefathers used chanting, so on and so forth. And by way of doing that, it speeds the vibration up. And now the sentinels that watch for thee, your eyes, begin to start to see things that you normally wouldn't see, right? Has anybody in the room have seen like what they call little apparitions, or it's not a body, but you look out, something out the corner of your eye, and you turn to look. Because if it was something that you was gonna take off, right? But that stuff is because odds are, at that point, you were probably real relaxed, right? And when you're very, very relaxed, your vibration picks up, right? You ever know any meditators in the room? Anybody that prays or meditates? How do you feel after your meditation? Relaxed. Now, how many people pray? Okay? Do you meditate after you pray? Because when you pray, you're talking, right? But you're supposed to meditate after you pray to get the answer, right? So a lot of times we keep our minds in an active state, by praying. Prayer is good because it just activates the mind and focuses it around certain principles. That's beautiful. But at a certain point, you gotta be quiet, sit still, and then all the revelations come, things that you're supposed to do. And that usually comes when you're very relaxed. And after a good prayer, or during a good meditation, you just feel real serene, right? Now the key is to take that energy and expand it in your walk while you're just out here daily. So as things happen, they don't cut too deep, because you're staying in an accelerated state where that stuff, even if it was, let's say, somebody was trying to get at you, you'd be oblivious to it because your vibration is too high. Does that make sense, boss? All right. So now what happens is, how do we actuate this, right? Now, for the sake of time, I don't want to do that to y'all. But chapter 1. Well, chapter 1, Moors don't be doing chapter 1, Moors. Right now, I would like to give honors to our Grand Sheik brother, Temple number 11, Grand Sheik Azim Hopkins Bey.
It's long.
That Moor has a demonstration. You probably still be able to find it online. Well, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. This Moor, he had a lot of older Moors around her. And the older Moors, just so if you didn't know, love when you make the Quran talk. When you bring the Quran to life, right? Like the Moor just did. I don't know if y'all know, the Moor just did, the 12-step ladder out his head earlier. I almost forgot I was on post. But praise Allah, Brother Azim Hopkins Bey did chapter 1 from memory. And that's pretty much our longest chapter. Time never went and just ran. The Moors was, go on, Mo! Get it, Mo, you working! Praise Allah! Islam, But the reality of it is, because when you get chapter 1, you get to realize it's the fall and how to get back. So we look at it as just the fall of man, right? Because it's the slowing down of vibration. Because man and Allah are one, right? But how did man tear himself away from Allah? Through carnal thoughts and words and deeds. Man tore himself from Allah and debased himself. Carnal thoughts, words, and deeds. Because when you pick that stuff up, you start slowing down the vibration. Carnal of the body. Body, right? Carnal, right? You ever seen a bird called a cardinal? What color is that bird?
Red, green.
Islam? Now, why, okay. Why do we have, what does green represent? Life. What does red represent? Death. No, it can lead to death. Bloodshed, warfare. Islam, root chakra, your lowest chakra. Islam. So, and I went back this way because your tailbone around that area, right? But why do we have this in that field of red? Because if you take away the 5 principles, that's all you got. War, bloodshed, death, right? That's what happened to our people. Anybody seen the movie Goodbye Uncle Tom? Anybody seen this movie? They have clips of it on YouTube. You can write it down, Goodbye Uncle Tom. For me, it's the most graphic slave movie ever, you know what I'm saying? Ever done. How the premise of the movie is, they take a film crew from modern day and they're in a helicopter. I guess they go back in time And the next thing you know, they're flying over a slave plantation and they land, and the film crew gets out, starts interviewing slave masters and slaves and all that kind of stuff, whatever. Anyway, they show a period of time when they're marching slaves, our forefathers who had become slaves by that point, marching them from New Orleans to a different area, right? Say again more?
Is that the movie where they show Nat Turner at the end?
Yes. That's good biblical time. Well, if you remember the point when they were moving them from one point to another around the New Orleans area, they had a flag in front of them, and it was this flag without the star. Go back and watch it. Goodbye, Uncle Tom. Okay? Because again, to be a slave, the only way you can remain a slave is if you lost these principles.
Life.
Exactly. Life, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Islam, and it being a 5-pointed star, when you study that, you get the understanding that that's how energies are invoked. Islam? So that shows you that these principles are not to be philosophized about, they're to be lived. We're to promote and practice. Islam? All right? So again, I would square those verses that I just read from chapter 17 with all of chapter 1 in the Quran. All right? And that'll give you a fullness of answer, right? Without us being, burdening or belaboring the point. Islam? All right. Now, anybody have any other questions before I go in to further my measure? All right. Again, as the brother Acting Sheikh, Raphael Hakeem Bey demonstrated that this is the weekend of our, our forerunner's birthright. His actual birthday is actually Monday, right? August 17th. And, we want to give honors to our brother, and we want to, start demonstrating certain points. Now, I want you to be patient with me because I'm going to do some reading. Right? And the reason why I'm going to do the reading because, we honor all true and divine prophets, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, and Confucius. What was the first command that was given to the Prophet Muhammad? Anybody know? No? Read. Iqra, right? In Arabic, but it's read. Right? Read in the name of thy Lord who created you. That was the first command that was given him. Right? Say again?
And the angel.
Exactly. Squeezed him, right? And told him 3 times. Right? And then after that, he gave the rest of the verses. Right?
He ran out of the cave.
Prophet Muhammad thought he had lost his mind. Yeah, like literally, like that's a whole nother thing. The prophets are sentient, right? What is a sentient? A sentient is a person that feels, right? Another word for that's empath, right? So a person that no matter what, like if there's the subtleties of something wrong, they'll pick it up. Whereas other people can't even tune into that, right? Well, prophets, they're attuned to divine will. Problem with that is that there's a period of time that exists before they're aware of their prophethood. They're living a whole life. Prophet Muhammad didn't become a prophet until he was 40, right? But every summer in the 9th month, this what we call Ramadan, even to this day, he would go, because his people were like killing each other in war and same stuff we're doing now, right? He would go up into the mountain and meditate, right? And sit back and reflect, right? And during one of those reflection periods, right? He was praying and then he stopped and was still. That's when the angel came to him and commanded him to read. But Prophet Muhammad wasn't a reader, he was a merchant, right? As a merchant, he's running around, trying to make money and stuff like that. So, they call him, in Arabic, they call him ummi, which means that he was only educated by his mother. Okay, so he wasn't a scholar, wasn't a poet, didn't sat with the, renowned scholars of the day. He was just the average merchant, right? So when, that's what they say, but that doesn't say that in the language. That was a slight that the European nations threw at the Prophet Muhammad to discredit him. But the word was ummi, which means mother. Right? But the point is that, again, like he was only taught by his mother. So the reality of it is that when the angel told him to read, he was confused. Like, I'm not, because he hit him with a very eloquent, the first 6 verses that they gave, is the purest, when you understand and study Arabic, that's the purest of Arabic in the whole Quran. After those 6 verses, they put, the angel revealed it in his dialect, which was the dialect of his tribe, which was the Quraysh. I'm going long. Point is that he told him to read, right? And our people suffer from a lack of knowledge, right? Right? Because we won't read, and if we do read, we're reading the wrong stuff. Okay? Right. So always remember. And now, how big, when your forefathers, your Moorish forefathers, how big were they on reading? Libraries, universities. One caliph named El Hakim, and this was the end of the empire. We talked about that Sunday, right? El Hakim, which means the wise. He, in his personal library, had 250,000 books. Yeah. And was well versed in most of them. Okay? He would sit down and advise scholars, and he was the Sultan. Islam? So you come from a tradition of that, right? So, yes, sir, please.
With quite a bit of the famous Asiatics, and they'll open up their homes to be able to show off their homes that they have worked so hard to get. You know, it's interesting. A lot of times they say what they don't find is a home library.
Islam.
They rarely find that.
Absolutely. You get the 80-inch screen TV and all that. And that TV is the center of the living room. But, you know, you go to certain homes, man, I mean, you have a library that's like, takes up whole walls. And that's the center of everything. You know what I mean? And that tells you how that house is set up. Islam. Like if you don't have a library, and respect to everyone's household, but if you don't have a library set up, you're doing your children, your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews, you're doing everybody a disservice. You know, like my children, I remember when they were in high school, you know, they would come to me with stuff, you know, like, well, Abel, what's such and such and such? I'm like, well, why don't you just like look it up? Like, Abel, we know you got a book on it. Which book is it? I'm like, okay, it's this one. Islam, you know, so that's the reality of don't sell your children's birthright short, right? Build those libraries, all right? With that being said, Marcus Garvey, when you hear Marcus Garvey, what is Marcus Garvey known for? Anybody? Pan-Africanism, what else? Say again? Forerunner, good.
The Asiatic people.
Asiatic people, good. He's known for nationalism, right? Okay? So everybody, you know, when his name is invoked, everybody starts talking nationalism and stuff like that. But how many people know Marcus Garvey dealt with divine creed too? Because remember, we teach that he was sent by Allah. That means he had a demonstration on Allah. All right? So let's go into that. So in Marcus Garvey's The Message to the People, and this is referred to as the Course on African Philosophy, Islam. And this was, the Prophet talks about the adept chamber. This was his adept chamber, Islam. And then a brother named Tony Martin decided to classify it and put it out so everybody could get after the forerunner had passed. Islam. This is our lesson 5. What does 5 represent in numerology? Change. Islam. How many principles you have? 5, because you know, you give them 5 principles, you live them, you'll change. Islam. So, and it's no strange happening that lesson 5 in here is entitled God. All right? It says, there is a God and we believe in him. He is not a person nor a physical being. He is a spirit and he is a universal intelligence. Never deny that there is a God. God, being universal intelligence, created the universe out of that intelligence. It is intelligence that creates. Man is a part of creation. So universal intelligence, and man was created in the image and likeness of God, only by his intelligence. It is the intelligence of man that is like God, but man's intelligence is only a unitary particle of God's universal intelligence. Islam, Moors? So the Prophet says that Allah is aught. Islam? And you are manifested thought. Out of that aught, him and the Prophet was speaking the same language. Islam? But again, if you don't know Garvey, you won't know what the Prophet was talking about. You know what I mean? And vice versa. Islam? All right, says, God out of his universal intelligence made matter, and he made the mind. The matter is made by God, and man is matter as well as mind. Go to chapter 11, it says the same thing in your Quran, when Jesus and Barada was talking. Islam? Therefore, man must be in the image of God, because nothing could exist without God. There is no God but Allah. La ilaha illallah. Marcus Garvey was a Muslim. They call him a Christian, right? And he used that openly. But when you read what he wrote, he was writing from a Muslim perspective. Islam. But if you don't know Islam or Islamism, you won't know that's what he was demonstrating. This is one of Allah's prophets. Yes.
Did he know that?
Yes, he know. But again, like I put out a question years ago. Morris turned on me for it because they didn't like my answer. But he said, I said this. I said, did the prophet, and I'll come back to your question, did the prophet tell us everything that he knew? Morris was like, of course, prophet revealed the light. No. I'm like, so y'all think he told us everything that we knew, everything that he knew, or everything that we could handle?
Everything that you can handle.
Islam? That's why he set up an adept chamber for ones that may be a little bit more spiritually mature. Then in there, you can unload. You know what I'm saying? But you don't do that amongst ones that are struggling with a concept like identity. Or struggling with something like hate. Because what you're doing, you're struggling with a manifest. Right? It's a falsehood. You know what I mean? Like the more demonstrated, it's measured up by time. Islam? All right? So again, yes, you know, the forerunner knew who he was, but again, it's how people could handle, right? Like in other words, like he knew there was something inherently wrong with the word Negro, and you know that by what he named his organization. The Universal Negro what? Improvement Association, right? So yeah, Negroes we have now, but it needs improving. Then the one that comes after him says, yeah, you're not this, and that. Here's actually what you are, right? But Allah's love. Islam? All right? So, and just real quick too, in the Moorish God newspaper that was out in the time of the Prophet, you'll see advertisements and articles in there from people that was not Moorish Americans. Islam? You know, so keep that in mind. The prophet worked with everybody. Garvey worked with everybody, right? So how do we not in this day and time? Like when we start working with the Nation of Islam and then the YBNs and different people, we went to the Christian church right next door and was treated like royalty. You know, when we do these type of things, you know, in the early days, we caught a lot of flack. We caught a lot of flack. You know what I'm saying? You know, how can y'all stand with them? This isn't that. Do you know they teach this? More Islam, more they Asiatics, more. I don't hate them. That's my family. Islam. And then as time went on, the idea caught on. Now you see it popping. I'm not saying we started it. I'm saying, but locally, wasn't too many groups really doing that. You know, and we give honors to our brother Gerald X from Muhammad's Mosque 15B, because that brother right there kind of initiated the thought. Islam. You know what I mean? And when he introduced the thought, we couldn't argue with it because it's in our teachers. We're like, well, Islam, the word unity is right here, right? So it's like, well, okay, Islam will be there, you know? And then, you know, you get a chance to see how masterful you are with what was revealed to you, because now you got to make what you have square with a room that don't teach it like you do. So that's where the mastery comes in, right? Because what you don't do is get up there and just teach your hardcore, hardline doctrine. That's how you break things apart. You got to learn how to adapt it and look for the universality in it, right? So like in here, he's talking about that universal intelligence. So you got to demonstrate universal intelligence by speaking to all of your people. Islam, nobody? Oh, you're just bearing with just Islam. Just sit through up to 5, Islam. All right? God, out of his universal intelligence, made matter and he made mind. I know I read that, but I'm just, read it again. That matter is made by God, and man is matter as well as mind. Therefore, man must be in the image of God, because nothing could exist without God. As God made the universe out of his universal knowledge or intelligence, so man in his unitary knowledge or intelligence can make a typewriter, an automobile, or a chair, but he cannot make the universe. But his unitary intelligence is not as great, or is not as much or as great as universal intelligence. All the unitary intelligence of the universe goes to make God, who is the embodiment of all intelligence. So no man can be as great as God, because he is only a unit of God, and God is the whole. Allah is all, right? Therefore, no man can measure God, nor ask God questions, because he is not as intelligent as God. Therefore, he cannot understand God. Therefore, it is presumptuous when man questions God from his limited unitary intelligence. What does that mean? It doesn't say don't ask questions. It's not what it's saying. But it's saying that because we in these bodies, and we've separate, because it's just a semblance, right? Because we're really not separate from Allah, but we think that we're separate. So, that's why the Muslims, our Moorish ancient fathers, would say stuff like, Inshallah, if Allah wills. Or we'll say, Mashallah, it's what Allah wills, right? Because again, we don't know what that is, right? But we know as long as we stay in line with these high principles, all will be well in time. You know what I'm saying? But even adding in time on it is folly, right? Because again, your success and your happiness is already here. Just because you can't grasp it, contain it, or define it, that don't mean it's not within your presence. Islam, and that's the problem where human beings do. We have to quantify, or qualify, and define. And Allah is beyond that, right? And the forces that we have to utilize for our success are those forces, right? That our eyes cannot see, and we have a tendency to not have faith in that which we can't see. Islam, and contrary to popular belief, we didn't learn that from the European. We've been struggling with that since the fall. Right? And again, stop the reverse worship of the European by attributing all your hang-ups to him. Do you know how great we make him by saying everything started with him? That's still worship. Islam? He's still a creator. He created everything. He created my condition, and he did this to me, he did that to me. Well, what did you do? And what are you perpetuating? Do you have any hand in that? And that's why I honor the forerunner and the prophet, because they didn't deal with victim mentality. They held us to our mess. Islam? All right? It says, man never dies. That's Marcus Garvey. Man never dies. Nothing dies. Man is made of body and spirit. The spirit is God. It is intelligence. The body of man is matter. It changes from living matter in the man to other matter in the soil, right? Say ash to ashes, dust to dust, right? It is always the same matter. It doesn't die in the sense of how we understand death. It changes. When man sleeps and passes away in the flesh, he goes to the earth that lives on, out of which other men and things are formed. He's describing the body at that point, right? All matter is related. So man is related to the earth, and the earth is related to man. We eat ourselves over and over again. We eat the apple, the banana, the fig, the tree, the grape. When we drink the water, we are eating and drinking ourselves all over and over again. Nothing is lost and nothing dies. Do not be afraid of death, because what you call death is only change, and you are still in the universe, either in spirit of God, to whom your spirit goes after the change as matter, which goes on forever. You are related to the flower. He didn't say that you are the flower. You're related to it, right? Because Allah is all. It says you are related to the flower, the beautiful rose, the trees, the fish, and the other animals, just as you are related to God. All of you sprung from God, who is universal intelligence. Do not be more cowardly than the rose, the apple, the coconut, the sheep, the fish, the cow, to do that which all must do, that which we call death, to die. If you weep, you are a coward. You know, the prophet talks about that. You know, it says it's selfishness for us to wish to call back to that which has already passed on.
Islam.
Right? But he says grief is natural to thee. It's okay if you want to shed a few tears, but you can't ball up in the corner and just cry and just stay there. Islam? The forerunner called you a coward. You know, the forerunner didn't mince words, right? Die like a man because you are not lost. You are still there. You only weep because you are a glutton, because you think that you will not get any more to eat or drink. You think that you will not get any more happy times. Just as you have been feeding up on things and other beings who came here before you, so someone else must feed upon you to make creation true. Otherwise, God would not be fair to everybody and everything. God is fair and just to everybody. He is no respecter of things or persons. Go to your chapter of religion for that. Then the forerunner gives us a poem. How many people knew Marcus Garvey was a poet? Brother Quillen? Islam, we got a poet amongst us, is what I'm saying. Right? And it's a blessing. He says, see if I can do it some justice. He says, it is everlasting as we know, this thing we call mysterious life. It has no beginning, some say. It's just a moving flow. It goes from this, then back to that. And on it moves in the course of well planned. That circles universe and all, thus passing through each single lot. Your life and mine is one long psalm, in tune with other beings, and other that breathes the air in seasons rough, seasons calm. One source, they say, contains the germ that grows and range of the universe, and all go back to this one cause whose life supplies the spreading germ. By being part of this source divine, each life has functions strictly drawn, for all must bow to endless time and form and shape that mark each line. So man must yield his flesh to dust with plants and weeds and birds and fish, with rocks and mounts and lilies too, as trees break up in fiber crust. Each one should hold his own and be a king in self alone. But this is not the way of life that claims but one almighty crown. Thus disappointed men grieve on, for he should like his own strange way, when suns and stars and steady moons would dance and change to suit his clan. It's safer than to have one God, whose life is first and ever so, and all the and all the rest to live in him, with all the things they had ever had. For fleshy man would ruin things if he controlled the source of life. The day would see an endless change, from slaves who crawl to haughty kings. Live on, God of timeless worth, and keep man in his place to live. Then when he rises to the height, he might perform his good on earth. For life right here is sad today, as life by man and company, and earth goes on, the grave should come to lead us in all in goodness' way. And that's called The Everlasting Life by Marcus Garvey. Islam? I'm not a poet by far. I know I just remixed the demonstration. But before I read this, and I just came across this in this book. This book's tiny, but it's like the Koran. But who knew he was a poet, right? And who knew he was speaking the same language as a prophet, right? Who knew he was speaking? He's speaking the ancient Egyptian wisdom, right? Why? Because he was John the Baptist. Come again, John the Baptist had the same wisdom. Islam Moors? Islam. All right. So I just wanted to share that part with you, right? And, just reflect on that. You know what I mean? The fact that your forerunner, there's a lot of people, you've seen people that fly the colors, the red, black, and green, right? I use myself. Brothers and sisters that I know that fly those colors generally don't have a divine side. Generally, they don't have a spiritual side to them. But know that the one that brought those colors did have a spiritual side. because he knew our people needed that. You know, because that's the essence of who we are. Islam Moors? All right?
حي على الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر حي